Now, welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Some Star Wars, where this time we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll that asked, how important is continuity or consistency in Star Wars to you? I'll also then be reading and responding to some of your comments, as well as showing off the artwork that was sent in to me this week. And let's just get right to the results, where we'll see that 65% of voters, or basically two-thirds, said it was extremely important. 28% then said it was pretty important. 5% said they were neutral or didn't matter either way, which left 1% to say not very important, and another 1% to say it didn't matter at all. And as is an interesting part is people's reasoning behind their vote, or in this instance, why keeping the canon consistent is important to them, though there were at least a few comments who argued against it in one way or another, and I will try to get to a couple of them. Anyway, yet again this week, I just want to take a quick moment to say thanks to everyone who votes and comments. As usual, there were a ton of fantastic, well thought out comments, of which I'll only be able to get to a small number, which means I should probably waste no more time and get started. And so we'll begin, as we always do, with the top rated comment, which this time came to us from DrewTube, who said, "It's important that there is one clear vision for what you are trying to accomplish, or else you are going to run into plot holes. You need a story group to really emphasize this and all. And you know, even if you're someone who loves the sequel trilogy, you have to admit it has some issues, that it doesn't exactly feel like the most coherent story ever, and there's really no excuse for that. There's no reason, other than money, to not take the time and to plan the whole thing out. At the very least, I hope this was a major learning experience for them, that Lucasfilm and Disney will take something away from this, and that things will be much better in the future. And hopefully, most of the fans won't be gone by the time they get that all figured out, or that those who already have left, maybe, will be willing to come back if big changes are made. Me crazy or a fool, but I do have hope that the future of Star Wars can be great, because there are so many talented people out there who do love it and could do right by it if given the chance. Also, I'd much rather be optimistic and wrong in this case than pessimistic and right." Okay, our next comment then comes to us from AJ Zago1. I think that's how you pronounce that. Anyway, they said, "It's very important. I thought the whole point of discontinuing the expanded universe was that the new movies could be more consistent with the new books and comics and create a more cohesive multimedia franchise. If the new canon fails at that, like The Rise of Skywalker contradicting the Poe Dameron comics, and they'd probably say that's a good question for another time. Seriously though, the one consolation they gave us when they canceled or swept away the EU and rebranded it Legends was this promise of a consistent universe where everything would line up and be a part of one giant story, no matter where it came from, whether that be a movie or books, games, comics, or consistent. And so I assumed that they'd be taking it to the next level, which is why they created the story group to weave threads through all these different stories from different mediums that would connect in a truly meaningful way, especially to the movies. Not that they'd all necessarily be required reading to understand the movies, but that they'd be worth reading." Which kind of brings us to this comment from Mr. Game Fan 77, who said, "Continuity breeds fan investment. If nothing is consistent, you get a feeling that nothing matters. If you feel it doesn't matter to keep up with every single part of canon, you won't take the deep dive to be an invested fan. Sure, you may still watch and enjoy the series, but no one will feel it is worth it to know every single detail of the franchise." And as a canon junkie myself, as someone who likes to keep up with everything, continuity is obviously very important. And there's been several books and comics in the new canon that I've read and thought were pretty bad and would have stopped reading if not for being Star Wars, if not for the need to want to know everything and all the little details. And you can call that sad and or stupid if you want, that's fine, but it's just my thing. And I know I'm not alone and there are others who do the same, but once you start breaking continuity or make it so that these stories just don't matter at all or feel so separate from the movies that they claim to be a part of, even a sucker like me is eventually going to stop buying and reading them. And that's what they don't seem to understand at Lucasfilm. The movies are the foundation of everything else they try to do and sell. They are the most important thing to get right, to keep consistent so that everything else can feel more meaningful and worth reading. Instead, they've got it completely backwards and used the other sources of canon to fix the movies, with the novelization of The Rise of Skywalker being the most recent and blatant example of this. Okay, next up here we have this comment from Murderous1, who said, "Sometimes continuity can be modified and new things can rewrite older things. In the old canon, stuff got inconsistent a number of times, but they always seemed to maintain the heart and vision that was at the center of the galaxy far, far away. I just don't think the heart was in the new stuff. Obviously, making money, moral value in them. Why can't Lucasfilm? I write stories and I always think about how my new encounters and characters affect my vision for the world I'm creating, and I would do the same for a world I didn't create as well. It's not that difficult, just to do some research. If you cared, it would be a simple task. And then we also have this comment from Jim Rett, who said, "It's important that everything adhere to what came before, otherwise the new stories will have no stakes or consequences. However, if a writer can bend the canon to tell a better story or add more depth to a previous one, then that is acceptable." And I agree, there's a difference between bending and breaking the canon, though the threshold between the two is very small. I mean, I would have had no problem if the sequel trilogy wanted to, in some way, made sense and were well planned out and executed. For example, if they wanted to blow our minds and have it be that Darth Plagueis had never truly died and he'd been Palpatine the whole time, that Sith could transfer their essence, which is kind of what we learned in The Rise of Skywalker, I almost certainly would have been okay with that, as long as the whole sequel trilogy kind of built to the reveal and didn't spit on the other two trilogies in the process. Instead, they just bring back Palpatine last minute, and in the movies, they never bothered to explain how the villain we saw rise and fall over the course of 6 movies suddenly comes back 3 movies later. Okay, moving on now, we have this comment from Mira, who said, "From the perspective, a story must be believable in order to work. For a story to be believable, it must adhere to its own story and laws, i.e. the canon. If it falters in being consistent, if it fails to be coherent, believable, immersive, or worthy of care, the story collapses. If the story collapses, it was never a story to begin with. Thus, it is impossible to break continuity in service of a good story. You cannot serve what doesn't exist. In other words, continuity, consistency is vital, not optional." We then also had this comment from Zodiaco Lightspear, who said, "If a story doesn't make sense within its own rules and context, I can't take the writer seriously." And for whatever reason, there are some out there who don't understand that when I or someone else complains about something not making sense in Star Wars, I'm talking about within the context of Star Wars itself, that it's not following its own established rules, not that I'm upset it's not following our own real-world rules. The Holdo maneuver and all the discussions or arguments or debates I've had over it is kind of an example of this, because by our own real-world rules or the laws of physics as we know them, something moving at or near the speed of light, even if it's much, much smaller than what it hits, will utterly destroy it. Within our reality, the Holdo maneuver should work. I'd never argue against that. However, since we'd never seen it in Star Wars before, and there had been situations where it would have come in very, very handy, like blowing up Death Stars, for example, it breaks the canon or lore because, until Holdo did it, we could just assume that, for whatever reason, they never needed to even explain it to us, that something like that doesn't work. But now that we have seen it, it calls into question why it had never been used before. Anyway, let's now move on to this comment from Henry Yates, who said, "It's important, but I can overlook small plot holes because, to me at least, themes, ideas, and the execution of said themes, ideas matters more than minor, nitpicky plot holes." We also had this comment from Dark Flame Pro, who said, "I wanted to lean extremely important, but went pretty important only because setting rules that are too constrictive doesn't allow for any brand new creative ideas to be instituted. For example, adding new force powers and cool vehicles, weapons, along with other aspects that I'm sure many of you can think of. That being said, it's honestly pretty important to keep it consistent for me because it feels more real, and I love attention to detail and lore and world building. So by all means, don't put yourself in a box with steadfast, rigid rules. Do new things, just not at the expense of general pre-existing events, lores, and ideas." And though I mostly agree with these two comments, something like adding new Jedi powers is tricky, because in the prequels we see Jedi at the height of their power, or just when they start losing their power, and by and large everything they do in those movies is an extension of something we saw in the original trilogy. The prequels don't add much in the way of new force powers, and the ones they do add feel consistent with the previous ones. In the sequels, though, we're suddenly teleporting objects across the galaxy, and Force ghosts are calling down lightning, and Rey is effortlessly lifting incredible amounts of weight with little or no concentration. And the real problem for me is not necessarily that they're adding new powers or showing enhanced versions of original powers, but that it's happening in the exact same story. Fast forward a few thousand years in the future and show Jedi doing different abilities, and maybe even more powerful abilities, I have less of an issue with that because it's a whole future, which is something you could even work into the story, the explanation. And I think powerful abilities just 200 years before the prequels. Okay, and next up here we have this comment from Candace Wilkerson who said, "The fact that Star Wars has continuity errors makes the franchise feel more like a mythology." And to be honest here, I think originally George Lucas was far more interested in creating a modern day myth than he was in creating, shall we say, another universe or galaxy with real consistent stories and history. He didn't write the first Star Wars movie thinking he was creating a shared universe or anything like that. That said, Star Wars has become something far more in the years since the original, and Disney and Lucasfilm should have been aware of that fact, that continuity is very important to a great many fans. And they even know this, hence, again, what they said when they got rid of the EU, and they created the story group, and promised us a consistent universe going forward. Okay, now I'm going to read off a few more comments, minus my own thoughts and commentary, before wrapping this video up, starting with this one from Dave Bryant that I found both very humorous, yet also very true. And he said, "Without the lore to give it weight, sci-fi and fantasy is just people talking nonsense in silly costumes." Then we had this comment from Kent who said, "In a franchise that has lasted over 40 years, continuity and consistency are very important. Shaking up the formula every now and then isn't bad, but only if you don't destroy what some people enjoy. Taking a beloved redemption arc from a character, retconning the actual action of his redemption, and giving it to another character will only upset those that were fans of the original story." Then we had this comment from Michael Matasso who said, "What's the point of a story that contradicts itself at every turn?" Then this comment from Payson Porter who said, "If you don't care about continuity, then make something original." Then this comment from Rain Dancer who said, "Mistakes are inevitable, I think. Especially looking forward to what Disney is doing. We're going to have Star Wars for a long time to come, and probably not everything is going to be perfectly adding up. A couple plot holes or timeline inconsistencies and alternate sources of canon are not a huge deal. However, when the actual big screen movies you are putting out there have lore-breaking plot holes that can keep people from enjoying a story, that's a big problem. Yes, I'm talking about the Holdo maneuver, pretty visuals, horrible plot element." Then this comment from Riggy Bogger who said, "It removes the immersion of a franchise when there is no consistency. When Yoda set fire to the ancient Jedi texts, yeah, it was cool, but that wouldn't be possible in the original trilogy. It reminds you that the story is in the hands of others now that don't seem to care as much." Then this comment from Ryan Bone who said, "What's the point of having a universe of stories if they don't have continuity?" Then this comment from Samian32 who said, "It really depends on the type of continuity we're talking about. Kanan Jarrus, another Jedi not named Yoda or Kenobi, surviving Order 66 was okay because it was reasonable that in the chaos following the rise of the Empire, a few Jedi were able to survive. However, changing overarching attributes like what the Force is and genealogy of its main characters is stupid and incongruent. Rey being a Palpatine was clearly a reach and was a scrambled mess trying to fit it together, the mess Johnson left Abrams." Then this comment from Shadow King, which I'm not going to read because I don't think I could do it justice, but I do encourage you to pause and take a moment to read it yourself. And finally here we have this comment from Nicholas who said, "This is all you need to understand the importance of world building. What really happens is that the story maker proves a successful sub-creator. He makes a secondary world which your laws of that world. You therefore believe while you are, as it were, inside. The moment disbelief arises, the spell is broken, the magic, or rather art, has failed. You are then out in the primary world again, looking at the little abortive secondary world from outside." And this is a quote taken from J.R.R. Tolkien. And I won't try to sum it up better here than the father of the modern-day fantasy genre did, but instead I'll just quickly reiterate the part about immersion, that the quickest way to lose it is to break continuity, and once you lose that immersion, once you're pulled back into the real world, part of the reason for watching movies like Star Wars or reading books like Lord of the Rings is lost, and that is to escape this world and feel like you're exploring another one entirely. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me why continuity and consistency is important to you, or why it isn't. Or you can feel free to offer up a suggestion on what poll question we should do next. Either way, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.